Outside of the front screen projection evidence, which I believe nails the fraud of the Apollo landings, there is other circumstantial evidence that forces the conclusion even more in the direction of Kubrick directing the entire Apollo missions. For instance, in the original release of 2001, there were many credits thanking NASA and many of the aerospace companies that worked with NASA on the moon landings. These credits have long been removed from all subsequent releases of 2001. For those of us old enough to remember, in the original credits, Kubrick thanks a vast array of military and space corporations for their help in the production. Are these the same corporations that supposedly helped NASA get the astronauts to the moon? One has to wonder, what kind of help did they give Stanley, and for what price? Film Wag the Dog, Dustin Hoffman plays a movie producer hired by the CIA to fake an event. His name in the movie is Stanley. In that movie, Stanley mysteriously dies after telling everyone that he wants to take credit for the event that he helped to fake. Stanley Kubrick died 4 days after showing Eyes Wide Shut to the executives at Warner Brothers. It is rumored that they were very upset concerning the film. They wanted Kubrick to re-edit the film, but he refused. I personally was in France when Kubrick died and saw on French television outtakes from several scenes that were never in the finished film. And finally, Eyes Wide Shut was released on July 16, 1999. Stanley Kubrick insisted in his contract that this be the date of the release. July 16, 1999 is exactly 30 years to the day that Apollo 11 was launched.
May I have the password, please?
Fidelio.
That's right, sir. That is the password for admittance. But may I ask, what is the password for the house?
The password for the house.
Yes?
I'm sorry,
Kubrick faking the Apollo moon landing for NASA is really outrageous, and surely someone would have talked, someone would have said something. You would think that Kubrick would have told somebody something. And, of course, we know he never did. Or did he? And that's where I'm going to go next, because I'm going to show you that, in fact, Kubrick made a film which described the ordeal of faking the Apollo moon landing. Because overtly explaining that he was involved in the faking of the Apollo moon landings would probably cost him his life, Stanley chose a vehicle to describe what he went through to fake the Apollo moon landings. And I'm about to show you that that vehicle was the film The Shining. The Shining is surely Stanley Kubrick's most misunderstood masterpiece. I use the word masterpiece guardedly because I've never really thought that The Shining was a very good film. At the time, in 1980, when I first saw it, I didn't like it at all. The way that Kubrick threw out so much of Stephen King's great source material and replaced it with a lot of things that just didn't seem to make any sense really bothered me. Hopefully, Before I'm finished here, you will see that it is only when Kubrick dramatically alters the script from Stephen King's novel that we can begin to understand what Stanley Kubrick is trying to tell us in his version of The Shining. It should be understood from the beginning that The Shining is Stanley Kubrick's most personal film, outside of possibly Eyes Wide Shut. Before we are done here, it will be easy to see that Stanley Kubrick was only using Stephen King's novel as a launching pad, excuse the pun, to be able to tell us a completely different story under the guise of making a film based on a best-selling novel. He did this for a very important reason, mainly to save his life. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. In fact, let's start at the beginning. There are two main characters in the film, Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, and his son Danny, played by Danny Lloyd. It is important to understand here that Jack and Danny are two aspects of Stanley Kubrick himself. Jack is the practical, pragmatic guy who wants to be a great artist, and he's apparently willing to do anything to accomplish his goal of being an artist, a writer in this case. Jack, like Stanley, has black hair, he is idiosyncratic, and he even smokes the same cigarettes as Stanley, Marlboro. Danny is the other side of the great director. He is the childlike Kubrick. It is Danny who is the real artist. The Danny side of Kubrick is psychic, youthful, and sees things that no one else sees. Danny has a tendency to tell people things that should have been kept quiet. The opening of the film takes place with us witnessing Stanley's pragmatic side, Jack, cutting a deal with the manager of the Overlook Hotel. The deal between Jack and the manager of the Overlook is that Jack can write, that is, create, all that he wants as long as he takes care of the Overlook. One other important point is that the manager of the Overlook tells Jack that the previous caretaker went crazy from the stress of the job and killed his wife and two girls. The manager of the Overlook Hotel, played by Barry Nelson, is wearing red, white, and blue. Jack's wife Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall, and his son Danny also wear red, white, and blue for almost the entire first hour of the film.
Yeah, I guess so. What about Tony? He's looking forward to the hotel, I bet. It's a torch. Now, come on, Tony. Don't be silly.
I don't want to go there, Mrs. Torch.
Well, how come you don't want to go?
I just don't.
In this symbolic interpretation, the Overlook Hotel is America. It was built, just like the manager says, on the graves of Indians. Even when walking on the floor of the Overlook Hotel, one finds themselves trampling over various Native American symbols. The Overlook Hotel is America. Like America, the Overlook Hotel is new and shiny. It is ostentatious, corny, and architecturally boring. As the manager tells Wendy, all of the best people stay here.
Lots of movie stars.
Royalty?
All the best people.
But there is something very deep happening. Kubrick brushed shoulders with the elite of the world. He knows what's going on, and he's using this movie to tell us. We begin to understand Kubrick's story from his use of symbols. As I like to say, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a symbol is worth 1,000 pictures. For it will be through the use of symbol that the real story of The Shining can be revealed. Barry Nelson, who plays the manager of the Overlook, while interviewing Jack, has an American eagle right behind his head. It is as if the eagle is the power behind the manager. Not only is the eagle the symbol of America, but it should be noted that the lunar lander of the Apollo 11 mission was called the Eagle. To the manager's left on the desk is an American flag. Symbolically, the manager is the face of the government of the United States. Jack has cut this deal with the government to be the caretaker of the hotel. It should be noted that Barry Nelson is wearing a toupee, which makes him look suspiciously like John F. Kennedy. The manager tells Jack that his main job is to prevent the Overlook Hotel, that is America, from appearing like it is decaying. The manager reiterates that this is Jack's primary responsibility.
It's not a very demanding job. The only thing that can get a bit trying up here during the winter is a tremendous sense of isolation.
On their first day in the hotel, Danny has a vision of the previous caretaker's daughters, and he sees that they are twins. The previous caretaker's daughters were not twins in the Stephen King novel. This discrepancy between the book and the film will grow in importance as we continue. Jack, Danny, and Wendy also meet Dick Halloran, who is the cook for the Overlook. He befriends Danny, and it is through him that Danny discovers that he is not alone when it comes to psychic ability. Dick warns Danny to stay away from room 237. Jack, Wendy, and Danny have now fully moved into the hotel. There's a long, cold winter ahead of them. At first, Jack loves the hotel, but he is having problems with his writing. Also, he cannot sleep. Meanwhile, Wendy and Danny are having fun. Jack is not writing. Instead, he is throwing a tennis ball at the wall in the room where his typewriter sits. On the wall, which is being struck by the tennis ball, is a Native American artistic motif that looks suspiciously like a group of rockets about to be launched. Finally, Jack throws the ball away and it disappears into the darkness of the hotel. Jack walks over and looks down at the model of the maze which sits outside the hotel. He sees Wendy and Danny caught in the middle of the maze, totally unaware of the nature of the deal that he has cut with the Overlook. When Shelley Duvall and Danny are running towards the maze, Shelley says, "The loser has to keep America clean."
Loser has to keep America clean.
Remember, Jack's job is to keep the Overlook looking like it's new, even though it's not. The Overlook is America. The loser has to keep America clean. A cold winter storm is now blown over the hotel. The storm is a symbol of the Cold War between Russia and the United States. Of course, the Cold War is also one of the driving forces for the entire reason for faking the moon landings. We were living in a very dangerous world, and it was shrewd to hide our advanced technology from the Russians. This is one of the reasons for the bears that are seen all over The Shining. The Russian bear, in its competition for the race to the moon, was a driving force behind having to fake the Apollo moon landings. Jack, his family, and the Overlook Hotel are trapped in the cold, just as America was trapped in the Cold War with Russia. The stuffed bears seen throughout the film are symbolically representing the Soviet Union's empire, but there are other explanations for these bears, and we'll get to them later. Symbolically, the bears seen through the film are also the representation of the pressure that the Russians put on the USA to get to the moon.
Because he hides. Where does he go? To my stomach. Does Tony ever tell you to do things? I don't want to talk about Tony anymore.
Danny is racing his tricycle down the hallways of the Overlook. Suddenly he stops and sees the twin girls at the end of the hallway. In unison they say to Danny, "Come play with us, Danny, forever and ever."
Come play with us, Stanley. Forever and ever and ever.
At this point in the film, we graphically discover the nature of the deal that Jack really has cut with the manager of the Overlook. It is the most crucial scene in the film. Danny is in a hallway playing with his trucks. Please note that the carpet has these strange hexagonal patterns in them with a long line in front of the hexagonal pattern. Now look at these pictures of Launch Pad 39 at Cape Canaveral and see that their launch pads look very similar to the patterns on the carpet that Danny is playing on. Also please note that Danny is playing with trucks, and it looks almost as if the trucks and everything are on the launch pad surrounding the rocket. But where is the rocket? Suddenly out of nowhere, the Overlook Hotel rolls the tennis ball from nowhere, the tennis ball that Jack lost earlier. It is a gesture, and the gesture says, "Want to play?" Mystified by where the ball came from, Danny stands up, and the audience finally sees what the nature of the secret project is really about. As Danny stands up, the answer is revealed in an instant. Danny is wearing a sweater with a crudely sewn rocket pictured on the